Hello everybody, this once again is FIDE Master Dalton Perrine from chessuniversity.com, and we're doing another video in the Tactics Time video series here today. In this video series, I'm again going to be working on solving some different tactics trader positions, which are going to be taken from chess.com. With each position, I'm going to show you guys the tactic, give you the chance to pause the video so you can work on solving it yourself. Then I'm going to explain my thought process and show the solution to the different tactics that we look at. So, without any more waiting, it is time for some tactics here. Go ahead and hit the start button and see what we get. Okay, so in this position here, white has just made the move pawn to b3. It is black's move in this position at the moment. Go ahead and pause the video and see what you can come up with for black in this position. Okay, so black's move in this position here. So we're going to start off with, once again, as always, looking at our forcing moves. I don't see any way to check white's king right now. No way to check him. Are there any captures that work out right now? Not really. The only capture that I see is knight takes g3 or bishop takes g3. I guess you could take on d2, but that doesn't make any sense either. And if you take on g3, white's just going to take back, and I don't see anything good there. Now, the third step is looking for threats. Now, whenever you're looking for a threat, you're either wanting a less valued piece to attack a higher valued piece, or you want to attack something that's not defended. In this case, b3 was actually a big mistake. There's two undefended pieces in this position, and we can actually do an attack on both of them at the same time. Actually, I guess there's three undefended pieces if you count the queen. But the knight on f3 is undefended. There's no pawn guarding it. And the rook on a1 is also undefended as well. So you have to figure out, how do these two squares connect? You could kind of take each piece and draw a bunch of lines out from it. Places like c3 would connect the two, d1 would connect the two, f1 would connect the two. But the only way, if you're going through geometry in this case, the only way we can actually move a piece that connects to the knight and the rook is the move queen f6. Queen f6 is attacking the knight, and also double attacking the rook in the corner, and there's no way that white can stop both threats at the same time. In this case, white makes the move d4, blocking off the attack on the rook, but we just go ahead and take the knight, and we've won a piece in that position. So sometimes your forcing move is not going to be a check or a capture. Sometimes it might just be a threat or a double attack in different situations. Okay, let's move on to our next position. Okay, so in this position here, white has made the move bishop to c3. Go ahead and pause the video here and see what you can come up with for white in this position. I'm sorry, for black. It's black's move in this position. Okay, so in this position here, it's black's move at the moment. This position's a little tricky because it's not really a forcing move that's going to be best here, but it's more so figuring out what we can do with this passed h-pawn. So this h-pawn, we would like to push it forward, but if we push it forward at the moment, white's just going to make the move king g2, stop the pawn from promoting, and then win the pawn next move. h2, king g2, we do have a check on f4, but the king will just capture on h2, and we don't have any follow-up after that. Now, this is a situation where sometimes you can flip the order of moves around. What if we do the move knight f4 first and then try to play h2 after that? Well, if we do knight f4, we now cover the g2 square with the knight, so we are actually threatening to play h2 because white could not go to g1 because of the pawn on h2, covering that square, and it can't go to g2 after the pawn moves because the knight's already on f4 covering that square. So knight f4 does threaten the move pawn up to h2. If white doesn't stop that, we're just going to push the pawn and promote. For example, if he plays bishop d2, we push the pawn. He takes the knight, we just promote though. So knight f4 pretty much forces white to play king g1 to stop the pawn from advancing. But once the king goes to the g1 square and the knight's already on the f4 square, that opens up a new forcing move. We can make the move knight from f4 to e2 check, forking the king and the undefended bishop on c3 here. Now, you will have to be careful that, let's say after the check, the king moves, you take the bishop. White does have the ability to push this pawn. He can make the move pawn to e6. So you have to make sure that the knight on c3 can catch the pawn on e6 because our king cannot catch the pawn. But if the knight's on c3 and the pawn goes to e6, we could play knight b5, the pawn goes to e7, and then the knight from b5 can go to c7 and cover the e8 square. So little things like that you have to double check sometimes, because if you go for this route and you realize that you can't stop the pawn, then you're going to have some issues. So if White had made the move e6, it does show that this was solved at this point. If they had included the move e6, we'd have to play knight b5, and then we could go to d6 or c7 to stop the pawn from advancing and promoting. Okay, so let's move on to our next position. All right, so in this position, it is Black's move right now. Black's pawns are moving forwards in this position here. So go ahead and pause the video and see what you can come up with for Black to do here. Okay, so in this position here, it's Black to move. This one seems a little tricky, or this one is a little tricky, because it looks like White's simply going to play either rook to f2 or rook to h2, pick up one pawn, then go pick up the other pawn. So we need to find a way to keep at least one of the two pawns alive, and we also need to get our king closer. So we pretty much have to start with moving the king closer. Moving the pawns doesn't do anything. If we advance the pawn, obviously White takes it, and that just doesn't work for us. So pretty much by process of elimination, we have to move the king closer. The only way to go in that direction is to play king f4. If we go king f4, let's say White goes rook f2, I suppose. His plan is to take the f3 pawn, then move over to h3 and capture the h pawn. With our king on f4 and the rook on f2, we can't guard the f3 pawn, but what we could do is kind of interesting. We could push the h pawn, pull the rook away from the f2 pawn, or from the f3 pawn, and then make the move king e5, and then once White goes to attack the pawn again, our king is close enough to defend. So it looks like king f4, and the important point is I can't move my king closer because White will take, I push, and then he goes behind the pawn. I have to sacrifice the h-pawn, then move my king closer again, and now we're going to end up getting a draw because we move our king up, advance the pawn, White's going to have to eventually sacrifice the rook for the pawn, and we end up getting the draw in this position. So definitely a tricky in-game tactic here. It looks like a hopeless position for Black, considering White has a rook against two pawns, and the king is not really close. But we end up sacrificing the h-pawn in order to get our king closer so we can keep the f-pawn alive. So kind of an interesting situation here. Okay, well that's it for this video though. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you guys around in a future video with doing tactics time or a different type of video for chessuniversity.com. Hopefully you've enjoyed this one. I will see you around in a future video, and I will talk with everybody later.